Hello, hockey, basketball, and soccer fans. My name is David. Thought I would start this video a bit after 3:30 on the afternoon of Sunday, 22nd of October, 2023, North American Eastern Time. So I responded to a tweet about whether Jay Woodcroft should be fired, and he didn't know what he'd been talking about. Well, I'm going to present my own response, which is Oilers fans can only hope. I'm a fan of the Leafs, but I'm a neutral observer with respect to other Canadian teams until the Stanley Cup playoffs roll around, in which case, my hope is, as it has been for quite some time, that a non-Habs Canadian team will win a Stanley Cup. Well, it's very. I mean, again, hopefully that'll happen. The Habs have won so many Stanley Cups, but I'm really hoping for something different. Will that happen? We'll have to see. But the very interesting claim made by Cale House about Jay Woodcroft having had no clue about what it had taken for the Oilers to win games on a season basis. So it's going to go with this very interesting debate here. And yeah. Yeah, very interesting thing to do. So yeah, so there's also that interesting one there, and look at. I can also put in as well that whether coaching actually works. Changing a head coach works. They're gonna just put in various claims. A couple one that made. There's one made in. Go back to 2020. Craig Button on Leafs Lunch, the then lunchtime show broadcast on Toronto's TSN 1050 radio, claimed that Sheldon Keefe, who had by then only been head coach of the Leafs for a few months, claimed to have basically not had any solutions to a Penguin squad that would end up beating the Leafs 5-2 on the in an away game for the Leafs, and that the time had come, according to Button, for Keefe to put players through battle and quote positional strength drills. I mean, very interesting take. That perhaps Sheldon Keefe hadn't been on the ball about what the Leafs needed to do to get ready to be ready to play games in the regular season. And I go back to a claim made also, back in, was it there? About in March of last year by Greg Button, well into what had by then become a lost season for the Winnipeg Jets. That so-called quote average coaching unquote had been why the Jets had struggled. Lack of systems had hurt the Jets badly in that season. Well, there's also the question about let's see what. Okay, so question becomes: does changing a team's head coach if guarantee results? It's too early to tell with the change that Toronto FC did late during their most recently completed season will end up helping matters along. I mean, John Herdman, who coached Canada's adult men's soccer team, certainly has a lot to learn. I mean that there's a very controversial remark he made in November after a game that the relevant Canadian soccer team had lost to its Croatian counterpart. That the controversial F Croatia remark. Yeah, talk about over and over again. Like I've said, it was incredibly stupid what Herdman had done. But again, maybe it was also a matter of frustration with how the team at Canada's adult men's soccer team had performed, and the problems within Canada soccer. Yeah, hopefully, 2026 FIFA Men's World Cup will go a lot better for the Canadian team, which is going to be co-hosting with the contiguous U.S. and Mexico that relevant FIFA tournament. But yeah, Toronto FC season was a disaster. But again, it's hard to blame Herdman for that because he was hired as head coach only very, very late in the season after basically Toronto FC had been so far out of a playoff spot that it was unlikely to get in. So, what I would do is, yeah. So we'll see what happens to Toronto FC during the 2024 Major League Soccer season. There's not going to be a postseason, but again, it's very interesting, to say the least, what'll happen. I definitely, hopefully it'll be a lot better than this season was. But what can you do? Alright, so, what about changes in head coaches? They're guaranteed. Well, let's look what happened to the Winnipeg Jets. Well, they got into a postseason. They got into the postseason last season. But 5 games, they were out. First game, they came out strong in the Golden Knights. And who would have thought? Okay, I didn't think the Jets would necessarily win that series. And I thought the Golden Knights would come out quite strong in Game 2 of that series. Well, that would actually happen. Jets lost that game by at least 2 goals. Game 3 was an overtime loss, double overtime loss to the Golden Knights by the Jets. Game 4 and 5 were each decided by at least 2 goals. And, yeah, in a do-or-die Game 5, Jets came out flat. It was no surprise that Rick Bowness had been blunt. That those players who had gotten to play in that game for the Jets had, for the most part, quit. That there had been, quote, no pushback, unquote. Well, I would say there was limited pushback. After all, it was 4-1. It was 4-0 by the time the Jets had scored their first and what would be their last goal of the series. Their first and their last goal of that game. The second goal was called off because of a hand pass from one-time Jets captain Blake Wheeler, whose most recent contract, the Jets bought out. Yeah. So again, changing head coach had some effect, but maybe not the huge effect that perhaps fans would have wanted. So yeah, no guarantee about that either. So in terms of head coaching, are there any changes there? I'd have to say that when it comes to head coaches, see about other Canadian teams that have that changed head coaches within the last during the 2020s have changed. So we're going to look at Marty St. Louis. Well, Dom Ducharme didn't last very long as the head coach of the Habs. Indeed, although Ducharme did coach the Habs to a Stanley Cup final, well, I'd say that the disaster that happened might have also come because Marc Bergevin, the GM, screwed up, had a rather disastrous offseason, and look at where we are now. And that the consequence of that disastrous 2021's offseason, the Habs struggled out of the gate, having put up just 4 out of 20 possible points to start the 2021-22 regular season. And that ultimately, changing the front office meant a different approach. Last season, the Habs ended up finishing over 10 points ahead of the last place team in the Eastern Conference, as opposed to 2 seasons ago, having finished dead last in the NHL. And also look at the Canucks changed their head coach last season from Bruce Boudreau to Rick Tocchet, and so far things seem to be working well. Excuse me. There's no doubt whatsoever that last season Tocchet did affect improvements within the organization. Canucks ultimately came nowhere close to a playoff spot, having finished 12 points out. This season, we'll have to see what happens, but so far, Canucks have a rather respectable 3-2-0 win, regulation loss, OT loss, shootout loss record. Same as the Leafs. Canucks are in a playoff spot, but, well, barely, understandably so. Golden Knights seem to be the most secure, having not shown any hangover of Stanley Cup of having gone to a Stanley Cup and won it all. That being said, again, head coaching change, will it work well enough for the Canucks to see playoff action? So far, things are, it was a win, mind you, it was a win, but it was not, it was not pretty. The Canucks did, after all, allow at least 3 goals for the second game in a row. Yeah, I'm just gonna go latest episode of the Locked On Canucks podcast. If I can find it on Twitter, there's a link to it. Part of the Locked On Sports series of podcasts via the Locked On NHL pod series. So, well, it's going to go to. All right, so going to go to the. Keep quitting. Yeah, that's the episode. Quinn Hughes having had a big game on Saturday Eastern Time down in South Florida against the Panthers. The Canucks did too. 5-3. Not pretty, but hey, what can you do? So yeah, there's no guarantee that Rick Tocchet will necessarily see the Canucks have a postseason in 2024. But only time will tell. So now I'm going to go for there. But yeah, we have done that and all that. So we covered the last couple of the head coaching changes. So among Canada's NHL and NBA teams. So we have Ryan Huska. Calgary Flames changed from Daryl Sutter in the offseason. So far, Flames have earned half the available points in 5 regular season games. After a flat effort on Friday Eastern Time against Blue Jackets over in Central Ohio, 3-1 in favor. I talked about my previous video about the suspension. The NHL Player Safety Department had slapped on Flames defenseman Rasmus Andersson. I think the only question will be the length of that suspension rather than whether there should be one. Anderson and the Flames side had decided to appeal the length of the suspension. Whatever it is, I hope he learns his lesson. But yeah, Ryan Huska, is that going to work? Will that help the Flames see playoff action? We'll have to see. Jury's still out on that. Now I'm going to go to the last team, the Raptors. We fired Nick Nurse in April after the loss of a play-in game to the Chicago Bulls. The Raptors had needed to win this many games consecutively just to see playoff action. The Raptors had finished in this position in the Eastern Conference. If they had finished in this position, they would have also had to play 2 games in a row. Had the Raptors finished in this position or this, they would have only needed to win this many games. And winning the first game would have meant they would have placed 7th. The top 6 NBA teams effective the 2021-22 season were going to automatically get into playoff spots. The hope is that this season the Raptors will get into one of those 6 spots, but it's hard to know if they will. So yeah, overall very impressive preseason for the Raptors. Darko Rajakovic, newest head coach, a rookie in terms of head coaches, but still with some NBA coaching experience, just not as head coach, other than with the Raptors. He has a head coach, I believe, with an NBA G League team at one time, a minor league team. But yeah, so far the Raptors have, after the 2023 NBA playoffs, have won this many games, preseason games, 4 different teams. So does that mean the Raptors are going to go on a roll to start the regular season? Not necessarily so. It'll be very interesting to find out if the hiring of Rajakovic and some changes by the Raptors will mean playoff success. That's to be determined. Regular season starts later this week. leaves Minnesota with Timberwolves. The Raptors will be hosting, but it'll be very interesting to say the least. Whether the bringing in of Dennis Schroeder to replace the production of point guard Fred VanVleet, who in June made his way over to the Houston Rockets, will work. I mean, it's not like, the Raptors have been impressed with overall during the preseason, but once they play a more wide variety of NBA teams, it'll be interesting to find out what happens. So just to note that the Flames' next game is coming up in later this afternoon Eastern time. So to look at this here, so it'll be on Sportsnet's West and 1. So let's go, where do we go here? So 5 Eastern time broadcast start on Sportsnet West and Sportsnet 1. It'll be the only Canadian NHL or NBA team to be in action. So let's see what happens. So we're gonna end this video. Will the Oilers part ways with Jay Woodcroft if things continue to go south? It's possible. I mean, it looked like the Leafs in 2023 offseason had been a disaster. The new signings had not really worked as effectively, and 3-1 down at the end of the first period, it looked like, oh no, here we go again. Leafs did come back and they did take a lead, but there's still chemistry issues. It'll be interesting to find out if the Leafs can if that overtime win over the Bolts will give the Leafs a jolt, or whether it'll just be a flash in the pan and Leafs end up this road trip with a 3-5-0-0 record. That won't be good. Or at least the road trip with a 1-4-0 record, and that's an overall regular season one of 3-5-0-0. So there's still serious questions about whether the Leafs can win on the road, or if enough members, if enough players, particularly forwards, outside of the Matthews, Tavares, Marner, Nylander quartet, if they get enough points from outside of that quartet, will be commonplace. After all, it's not like every day, it's not like in every game, Matthews, Marner, Tavares, or Nylander will necessarily get a point. But again, yeah, one would expect the top forwards to produce. They're being paid. They're probably the biggest, have the biggest cap hits. And as to whether the Leafs should sign Nylander, well, that's not on Sheldon Keefe, but it was looking not very good. Perhaps Sheldon Keefe was going to lose his job as head coach before the season had been done. Does the weekend game the Leafs end up winning guarantee that Keefe's going to keep his job? Until the Leafs have played their last game of the current season? No, not yet. It'll depend on how the Leafs do. After all, if the Leafs dig themselves too much of a hole and they end up well outside of a playoff spot by the end of the month, then Keefe could be out. Yes, I know that Stanley Cups are not won in October or November, but before December, typically at least 10 of those teams that were in playoff spots, that end up being in playoff spots, will stay in those spots. Just because of that. So let's see what happens with the Canadian teams, with the Canadian NHL teams. It's going to be very interesting to say the least. I mean, whether DJ Smith will last the entire season for as head coach of the Ottawa Senators. I mean, he and Keefe have, are the longest serving actively serving head coaches of Canadian NHL teams. Anyway, I'm going to end this off. So if you like the video, please make sure to click the like button. If you want to subscribe to my channel, please feel free to do so. And if you click the notification bell, you'll get more time notification of videos that I put out. I try to put out videos at least every other week. On that note, I'm going to say, go Leafs go Raptors go Toronto FC go, and go Canada go.